In this update, we got a tropical disturbance in the Gulf that's going to be gaining intensity right before landfall. And then our next tropical system in the Caribbean that's going to bring a lot of flooding. And then yet we have another system back behind that. And then what may be coming behind that system as well. Welcome back, everyone. Pal ponderonweather here with an afternoon update. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to break everything down for you. So if you do like detailed weather outlooks, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at this satellite picture, because over the last couple hours, this satellite picture over out here in the Gulf of Mexico is starting to actually come together. I mean, you can actually see these clouds coming around this counterclockwise swirl. It's almost trying to form. I mean, the National Hurricane Center went out there and investigated it. They kept it at 40%, but I do feel as we get into maybe the 7 o'clock advisory, I wouldn't be surprised they actually bump this up to about a 60 to 70% a possible development, because it's going to be moving westbound. It still has about a 24 hours to work with. Got no shear really in very warm water, so it's still possible that this actually could be forming into a possible tropical depression, or maybe even a slight tropical storm like right before landfall. That is definitely not out of the question, because let's take a look at the overall setup right now. They do have in fact kept that 40% chance of developing. It's essentially right along the coastline of Texas and Mexico. This is going to be slowly progressing westward over the next 24 hours, and it's going to bring a lot of heavy rain. So as it gets a little bit closer to the coast, it's going to hit some upper level winds that's going to be able to steer this further north, and it's going to be bringing a lot of heavy rains, especially into South Texas, actually, where they desperately need the rain. So let's take a look at the overall setup, because the National Hurricane Center did in fact actually have their reconnaissance plane go out there this afternoon and did actually find some 30-knot winds. So this actually is already kind of borderline, has some actually 30 knots right on the cusp of a kind of a minimal tropical depression of around about 35 mile per hour. So they did actually find some 35 mile per hour winds, and it's down to about 1,009 millibars. So it's trying to gain an intensity and trying to get a name for itself right before landfall, and there's definitely a slim possibility that could actually happen indeed. So let's take a look at the overall rainfall totals. So here's the latest update from the European model that's done very well with these tropical systems so far. But every update, it has actually shifted a little bit further off into the east and bringing some heavier totals. So even though the center is right along on the borderline of Texas and Mexico, a lot of these tropical systems, they're right side loaded systems. So typically a lot of the convection, a lot of the rain is well away from any center it may have. So it's going to bring a copious amount of rains, pretty much fine tuned in and around the Galveston area, up towards Houston, possibly a couple inches, but mainly this consensus, especially right along the coast into Galveston. Those areas I think are going to be hitting hard with at least several inches, if not 4 to 6 inches of rain from this system. And then it traverses off into East Texas, headed into Louisiana. And I think a lot of the rain does impact eventually getting up into portions of Arkansas as well. But I think it stays away. It's right along this ridge of high pressure that's pretty much dominating the state of Texas. And it's not going to be able to impact, maybe central Texas or North Texas. I'm not really expecting any rain out of the system whatsoever. It's all going to be South Texas into East Texas, going into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. All this is going to be a kind of a juicier air mass. And I think a lot of this could actually pull up even into Arkansas. In fact, the overall NAM model is a little bit more bullish. It actually keeps this maybe potential center kind of together a little bit further into land. I don't think this possibility is going to happen, but yeah, it's printing a bullseye of 6 inches even further off to the north into East Texas. So I'm I'm thinking, it's going to be these totals down here further off to the south into southeast Texas and along South Texas are probably right. I'm not thinking this 6 inches up here is going to come to fruition. They might get some rain, but definitely not up to 6 inches in Tyler, but definitely along the coast here into Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. This is going to be kind of a juicy mess combined with some of these fronts, and this just kind of a juicier air mass is going to be impacting these areas. Here's the latest Weather Prediction Center update as well. So it kind of has these same totals from essentially Victoria to Galveston to far southeast Texas, right along the coast with the heavier totals. I'm thinking the Houston Metroplex, probably about an inch or two of rain from this system, and obviously lighter amounts as you pull further north. So this is probably more in line of what you're probably going to be getting in East Texas at less than an inch of rainfall from this particular system. And again, I'm not expecting anything really for Central Texas and North Texas from this particular air mass. But, some heavier totals could align into Louisiana as well with an inch or two of rain. So let's take a look at the overall big picture for the U.S. because there is some severe weather to talk about today. And in fact, the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted a slight risk for severe storms. And yet again, the Dakotas, they've been getting hit hard as of late, and yet we have another system going to be impacting. So into North Dakota, it's mainly going to be a big time hail producer. Some of those could be on the 2-inch hail variety size of that golf ball size hail or greater, and then amid lesser intensity storms as they fade into Minnesota. On the southern branch, they're looking at some higher wind gusts of over 65 to 75 miles an hour in South Dakota. That's going to be impacting those areas today, and some of that could actually fishtail down into Nebraska as well. So definitely be on high alert as we get later on in the afternoon, especially into the evening time frame, because these things could be actually pretty bumpy with some very large hail, the golf ball size hail, but up to tennis ball size hail in North Dakota, and then those 65 to 75 miles an hour in South Dakota, and then a little bit lighter as you get into Nebraska as well as into Minnesota. But now let's take a look at that other system, which is your potential tropical cyclone. So they still haven't found actually a closed low with that system because it's so close to land, right? It's the proximity to land is just kind of hugging the coast, which is very rare. I mean, it's almost unheard of to see a system that's so far south. So it's so far south that it's impacting land. So it's bringing a lot of heavy rain, but it's not actually not able to get out into the open waters long enough to form into Tropical Storm Bonnie. I still think it does. It just hasn't done it yet. So heavy rainfall is expected to spread westward across the Windward Islands and parts of northern Venezuela over northern Colombia through Thursday morning, and localized flash flooding and mudslides is possible. So we're talking about winds to tropical storm force are expected over the APC Islands by this afternoon. And then tropical storm conditions are going to be expected off the northwestern coast of Venezuela and northeastern Colombia tonight. So yeah, there is a little bit of uncertainty in how this is going to be gained in strength because like I mentioned, the proximity to land. But I do feel once it gets out in these open waters, heading towards Costa Rica, heading towards Nicaragua, I think it's going to be taken by then easily Tropical Storm Bonnie, and even a formidable Tropical Storm Bonnie making a landfall somewhere into Friday time frame and around Friday towards the weekend, but heavier rains. We're looking at a lot of flash flooding up here, so definitely be on high alert as this system nears. And let's take a look at some of those rain amounts. So yeah, as this system moves westbound about 30 miles an hour, it's flying. That's another thing that's hard to, because it's just kind of moving so fast. It's almost kind of hard to form because it's actually moving fairly quick right now. So, but it is expected to slow down a little bit, and I think that's when it actually starts to get its act together and take a formidable storm name. But you can definitely see the heavier rains right along the coast, some of the upwards to almost 10 inches of rain. So you're talking a lot of serious flash flooding up here into Costa Rica, into the Nicaragua area. So if you live up here, that's definitely a huge concern, especially with all the rain that you've been seeing as of late. So you're just compounding that with another 10-inch bullseye. And this actually continues to move across, and I think it actually feeds over into the Pacific. And so if this does in fact, go, which I feel it will, if it does have a closed low still with it, it'll keep the name Bonnie. But if it's, goes down to a depression, it loses its tropical characteristic and then reforms on the Pacific side, it will take a new name on the Pacific side. So as we take a look at our third system, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's another system behind this one as these formidable waves, again, very rare for this time of year, heads off the coast of Africa. It sets up shops. Got a 30% chance because it's a little bit higher probability of developing. Got a little bit weaker ridge by then up here by Bermuda, but that's actually going to be traversing northwest and going to be impacting the Windward Islands over the next couple of days, with some very heavy rain as it tries to get its act together. But this one has a tough road. So what I mean by that is it's going to run into a lot of shear, right? So there's not much shear where it's at right now, but as it continues to traverse northwest, I do feel a lot of these reds, it's going to be able to just tries to form as it continues to shift northwest, it's going to be able to shear it apart. So this one's going to have an extremely tough road to continue to any sort of tropical storm entity. So between now and then, it's going to be a pretty heavy rainmaker. But the further northwest it goes, I do feel it's going to kind of shear apart and then eventually just lose any type of tropical characteristics whatsoever and kind of fade apart, because a lot of what is happening is we are in a positive MJO. We're in a little bit favorable phase right now. So we're in phase 2, which is really a high impact phase, but this is late June, right? So, and then we're going into phase 3, so which is another kind of high impact phase. So, but as we transition, you can definitely see where we are right now. Then going into the first week of July, we're going into, phase 4, phase 5, and eventually heading into, phase 6, towards the July 10th timeframe. That's typically a little bit unfavorable phase. So I do feel once these systems kind of move out of the way and kind of, do their thing, then I think a lot of this, we're going to have a little bit of a lull in the activity. So you can look at the probability, guidance over the next 4 to 5 days. It still has, maybe a 20% chance of this developing as it crosses over the Windward Islands. But beyond this, I think it really starts to fall apart and just kind of loses any type of tropical characteristics whatsoever. And there's that system out in, that will be Bonnie making landfall into Nicaragua, crossing over sometime late this weekend towards the holiday. And it's got, again, a formidable storm trying to redevelop out here in the Pacific. So I do feel this is just going to continue to traverse westbound and head out into the Pacific. And hey, you never know. This could at the end of the day, help the monsoon a little bit again out there into the open waters of the Pacific, pull some of that moisture once it gets elongated into, of course, the desert Southwest. So hey, this actually could eventually start to bring some more rains and help the monsoonal flow in a week or so, or 10 days or so, as this will continue to traverse across. But after that, I do feel we're going to be taking a little bit of a lull in the pattern, because I showed you there's going to be a lot of shear that's going to be moving into a good chunk of the Caribbean. There's going to be a little bit more unfavorable phase in the MJO. And then we look at the EPS guidance and look at a lot of sinking air coming into that part of the world. A lot of this red, that's indicative of a lot of a sinking air. You kind of need upward rising motion air to have, even a chance for tropical storm development. We have that now, but I do feel a lot of sinking air pulls into the region once we get into July, at least the first couple of weeks in July. But once we hit around the 20th time frame, so about the third week of July, we might start seeing a little bit more increased activity out here into the Caribbean, off the MDR region. So we'll be watching for this. So I do feel after these systems kind of move away, then back behind it, we're going to be seeing a lull for a couple of weeks in the tropical atmosphere. And then I think it ramps back up again by the time we get into that third week of July. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.